I think we've started recording. Okay, yeah. Okay, so first, let's see. I guess why are you interested in like publishing your work or in publishing in this journal in particular?
I'm interested in publishing my work to kind of just like expose myself as like a researcher, to kind of just, put my work somewhere in case it's possible that it can help someone, like in terms of just finding a more maybe compressed might be the right word, but just like an easy access like summary of like different subjects in the field. So I feel like for that reason I want it to be published, because I found myself like finding a lot of work during my research that I was like, oh, okay, like it kind of gathered the information that I'm looking for in a good way. So I'm hoping that my work can do the same, but for what I'm working on in specific. And then as far as this journal in specific, I feel like it just, a journal that's kind of advocating for students, regardless of whether or not they're in a lab or not. It kind of it appealed to me because, like, as someone who didn't get a chance to be a part of one, it was really helpful to just like find this publication.
And then I know, like, for example, for scientists, for engineers, publishing is like a very big part of what you do, especially, I mean, from like normal lab classes to like very big people who actually carry out research as their job. So what's not necessarily discussed about a lot is like how your publishing would help your research or vice versa. So how do you feel like publishing your work has been able to help with your research experience? Did it add some more pizzazz, if you will, to your research experience? Was there something about publishing that not just made your research experience better, but your thinking about research, if you will?
Yeah, I feel like before I got the chance to do research, it was just a word to me. Like I was just like, oh, like if you're in the medical field, or like if you want to go into the medical field, like research is just like a part of who you are, right? Versus me as like aerospace engineering, I was like, oh, I wasn't 100% sure about like what research would look like. So I feel like as far as like right now, I think I kind of find it necessary, like for someone in college. I kind of wish, like, I know they have like the class, sometimes they have classes that are just a research class, but I think like if they kind of push for someone to like, or for students to find a research position, I know there's a little off topic, but I feel like handshake isn't enough. Like, that those are just jobs, but for the most part, at least for me, a lot of times I don't hear back for like another month, maybe, if I do hear back. So the question was like, how I see research now, right?
Yeah, how has publishing changed your research experience? But you can talk about anything, feel free.
Cool. Yeah, so it as far as like how it's kind of shaped the way I perceive it now, I think I like it mostly because it's kind of like a subject that you're choosing to look into, but how you look into it can be up to, like either the individual person or the group, and like how it might be more effective. And I think it just kind of like showcases how there's different ways to approach problems that ultimately all like contribute to resolving the same issue, if that kind of makes sense. So that's kind of how it's shaped my understanding of it, and like it's something I feel like I want other students to experience as well, because in the same way that some students say, oh, you need to go study abroad and all that. Or you need to, like, if you haven't been to the beach in San Diego, what are you doing and all that.
Yeah.
I kind of see like research as like, oh, like you can't really 100% know if you want to do what you're gonna do unless you're exposed to a little bit of research. And that definitely varies by field, right? But as far as like for mine, I think research will help like solidify what you're doing in this career and like what you want to delve into, because they're like, even in just like mechanical engineering, it can range from like biomechanics to like what I'm doing in aviation and everything. So I think that's why research is really beneficial, or like that's the way I see it now.
Yeah, I agree with like research and career, especially like in this aspect of also like learning with research. More often than not, you see people say a lot of things in class, and it's easy to like, how do I say this? It's easy to like forget, not necessarily forget, but lose interest because you don't see per se what people are talking about. I reckon like it would be a lot more easier for people to learn if you were actually seeing what you were learning about, as opposed to just learning about it theoretically in class.
Right. Yeah. I definitely agree with that. And then another thing is like, like doing the research feels like you're in a class as well. But it takes the load off of like, I have a midterm, or I need to do well in this class and everything. It's more out of like pleasure for learning the subject, and instead of just like finding it as something stressful. But definitely I agree with the concept versus application aspect of it.
Definitely.
It's different, yeah.
Yeah. Since you're an MAE major, you must have like what's it called? Fluid mechanics. And I feel like that class is a class that would be a million times better if I was actually seeing what in God's name they were talking about. Like,
yeah, exactly. And that's the funny thing, because that's like I would say that's probably the most stigmatized class, like in MAE. Like everyone's like, oh, like, are you really, if you just say like I'm taking fluids, like people are like, I'm sorry,
yeah.
But actually like taking so like this past quarter in the fall, I took MAE 190, which is like topics in MAE, and mine happened to be computational fluid mechanics. So like that was a I almost wish like that's how the class was taught instead, because it's like concepts in fluid mechanics, but like actual application. So like for the final project for that class, we had to simulate like in an AC system kind of circulating the room, and then include like a cough of someone like with COVID to track the way the particles moved and all that. And I feel like if students were able to kind of visualize it in that sense, like it would definitely be more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I also think something that's interesting about teaching is the stuff that I remember well is when someone teaches with an example. Say, for example, I think like word problems and how it helps people like realize what algebra is actually for, and just using that for like engineering concepts or like science concepts, especially like, and then you go the step further of like asking questions about like things we practically don't know the answer to. So you start delving into research. And I think it's kind of like an expensive field that has a lot for a lot of people. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of money and experience to get there. And there's a lot of patience in between, which is kind of like hard to find, if you will. But,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
But yeah. So what motivates you in researching what you're researching about? So you were talking about your work on looking at airplanes, the aviation system, and how to you might say better manage the aviation system in order to curb climate change. So what motivated you about researching this topic? I know you talked about it in the last call, but I'm just going to talk about it again. But yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely like I think like one thing I didn't get to talk enough about was when I said like everyone in this field is like interested in like SpaceX or Tesla or something like that, or NASA right off the bat. I kind of like entered like higher education with that same like with that being like the standard, I guess. People expecting you to work with something with a rocket.
Mhm.
Um, but I was like that can't be it, right? Like that can't be everything, especially when I personally wouldn't say my values align with that of like Elon Musk, for example. Uh, so like I kind of wanted to find something outside of that, and I definitely found it when personally I always struggled between like wanting to be a teacher or
Mhm.
wanting to be an engineer.
Mhm.
And like I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to help my community and like contribute to it because of how much it helped me. Um,
Mhm.
but I kind of saw this as like an opportunity to do both, to like kind of help communities while also like pursuing something that's always like kind of caught my attention.
Mhm.
So when I started my research on like the sustainability aspect of it, um, finding out things like the different so the simulations that they ran on different aircraft models and like how they went about it caught my attention because like I like looking at the numerical aspect of things. So that's kind of like what inspired me to move forward with this as my research. But
Mhm.
what I would say was like the reason I did this one or like stuck to this whole subject was mostly to find like what's necessary. We see like a lot of like social media stuff or just like regular media about like, oh, climate change is this, like is in this stage and like it's necessary to reach this by this year. But I was like, what are the steps necessary and what are the steps being taken?
Mhm.
So yeah, and then as far as like concluding my research, I think just like a way to kind of encapsulate it consisted of like me doing my own projection of what could be realistic if we
Mhm.
did like even like the smallest changes, which could be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. I think your work, something that I liked about it was that it brought into perspective something that I feel like is not necessarily talked about a lot in research. Like, for example, in science, especially in basic science, or even engineering sometimes, you try to look at this very specific thing and like zone in on, say, for example, if you're in biology, you try to zone in on this very specific mechanism. And something that I found that was quite refreshing was almost like bringing it back to reality. And so what kind of aspects, like almost like investigative journalism, but from a research perspective, which I really did enjoy. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's an interesting way to look at it, like kind of a investigative journalism in a research perspective. That's like the perfect way to say it. Like like or that's how I would say like what the research is like for me, 'cause something I think like is really important is to incorporate like ethics into science. And we definitely see that like in biology, we have like we created vaccines to like help other people and all that. But like in engineering, like I feel like sometimes or well specifically I'll say aerospace, like we're so caught up on wanting to send stuff to the moon or find other planets and all this other stuff that we kind of forget the impact we're having on like the planet we're inhabiting. So I feel like that's something necessary to just like maintain in research.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I would say like a very positive thing is how, I would say, how close to the public the topic could be, especially from your perspective. And the reason why I say so is like with a lot of grandiose research, you get to, like, as I said, the nitty-gritty. But even more important, I think now more than ever, we need to like bridge this gap between scientists and the public. Because when people talk about science, I mean, practically, for example, anyone who's college educated, when you talk is very different and you use words that are, I mean, I'm sure there's someone who would watch and they don't know what the hell fluid mechanics is. They're like, one God's name, what they're talking about. And I think it's very important for us, especially if we're going into research, to know how to bridge that gap between, oh, this is a very technical term, to, oh, you know the Paris Accord, right? Okay, let's bring that back to like something that is based and grounded in reality, which is very important. But,
Mhm. I agree with that. Yeah, because a lot of research articles, like they have a lot of language that's like specifically catered towards their specific like research interests.
Mhm,
So like for example, like during the times I've looked into like my professors and all that, and
mhm,
I'll see like what kind of publications they have, and like it's a very specific case study on like a specific composite material or something like that, that
mhm,
like I wouldn't have known existed if I hadn't looked on their webpage. So
mhm.
it's definitely important to make research like digestible for other people.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like that aspect is definitely important, but there's almost this lack of the in between. I took this history class, I think. Yes, history. And it was very interesting the way we were asked to write. Almost like, yes, you're meant to do research and find all these numbers, but you're meant to like bring it back to like reality and like ground it in reality, especially with something like the common person is experiencing, which is nice. But yeah. And then moving on, the next question is, so what's your career goal or your career aspiration? What do you see yourself doing in 10, 20 years? And how is it relevant to the research that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I don't really have like a map, right? Like at least like a 5-year plan I don't really have yet, but I
Mhm,
do want to complete like my master's. Hopefully, like I have submitted my applications and everything, so I'm just waiting
mhm,
to hear back. So I'd like to complete my master's in order to just expand like my understanding a bit more and work with other professors and other kind of like research areas related to what I want to do, which is like the sustainability aspect.
mhm,
Um, but like in 10 years and 20 years, I do hopefully still see myself, or I currently still see myself like working with like, um, what is it? Like sustainability oriented, like industry companies, that, and I would definitely like, ideally, I would want to keep on working with like the topics that I mentioned in my research. So like different aircraft designs or just fuel alternatives and stuff.
mhm,
I think like just having learned what I did that summer, I feel like it's gonna be very difficult for me to like stray away uh from sustainability with the knowledge of like the cost of not uh attending to those needs and like issues. So
mhm,
I hope to still contribute to that like in the next 10 and 20 years. And then after that, I might even like still be into like teaching and everything, or
mhm,
even in the next like in between the 10 and 20 years, maybe teaching like and helping other students research the same thing would be very helpful, I think. But
yeah,
those are like the two things I see myself doing.
yeah, that's really, really good. Thanks for sharing. So how did research change your perspective on, say, for example, I want to say both climate change or this idea of, I don't want to go like anti-consumerism kind of aspect, no, but almost like how did it change your idea on this idea of the social issues that surround climate change? Because when us as scientists talk, we talk about, oh my God, the hard facts. However, there's a very real and almost it inhibits progress in terms of like the social issues that surround climate change. So how did your perspective on those things change when after you did research?
Hmm. I think I'd say that I feel a lot more conscious about it. It was always like an issue that I cared about to some extent, and I would say like a larger extent. I always thought like I hope something can be done about this, and I think that that's what I'll stick with. I used to say like I hope something can be done about this, but like now I kind of think I hope I can do something about this, which is like a growth that I'm kind of thankful for through this program. Like just being able to say like I hope like or I know what I can do to help, and I hope that what I do in this field can actually contribute to this change, or this like kind of progress towards sustainability. But at like on a social level as well, I would say that I kind of like think about it pretty often, whether it be in my specific field or like policies in place, like the Paris Accord, for example. I wish like countries didn't just like sign themselves up for it, but instead like committed to the most that they could to contribute to it. I definitely will say like I think about like I think about it so much that like it's definitely a little frustrating sometimes to think about like how short of a time span we have before like it can make a bigger difference. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree on this idea of like signing up for something as opposed to like committing to something. I feel like, for example, in college, if you just sign up for stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're committed to something. Like, say, if you signed up for a class, but I have to do the class, it's not necessarily because I want to do the class. And I feel like that's a very distinct difference that at least for bigger entities, it's going to take a whole lot of time to like move towards. Because, for example, say for America to like commit to the Paris Accord as opposed to just signing up for it, it's going to require very massive movements across all borders, where it's not it's not just that the president wants to change climate change or he wants to do something about climate change. It's that everyone from like the president to like anyone in just osmotic waters, if you will, want to change something about climate change, wants to do something towards that. And sometimes it seems like a very distant, bleak future, but something you hope would happen, at least very soon. But
Yeah, it's definitely something that I would say like requires like resilience, like wanting to alleviate climate change requires resilience when like you take into account like the priorities of different countries, because there's like I had mentioned as well, like we have the technology for a lot of these changes. It just comes down to the funding. So it's like you see it, but then you just have to like hope that that change will happen, and like not give up and say like, oh, we're not gonna make it like to when we need.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, we gotta keep telling ourselves.
I mean, there's nothing else you can tell yourself. That's the thing. Then I guess with your research and with what you found, how has that changed, the daily life decisions that you make, if any? I know like with aeronautics, it's such a huge field that it's okay if like your daily life, oh, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't know if I had
Awesome.
that a little bit.
It's so good. It's okay if your daily life has not been changed, but like kind of like also like your daily decisions. How has your findings with your work impacted that aspect of your life?
I think I'm more intentional with the things I do,
Mhm,
both inside and outside of academia, I would say. So for example, with my classes, like my first 2 years, I think the biggest difference was that I was just enrolling in what I needed to. And
mhm,
like now that I'm like approaching the end of like my classes and everything, I want to learn. So for example, I'm like in a climate oriented class right now.
mhm,
And this time around, like it's not just like a class that I'm in or despite it saying that it's an elective on my 4-year plan,
mhm,
uh I don't see it in that way. Like I want to be able to like learn more
mhm,
so that I can better myself. But outside of it as well, I think like I just want to do a good job at everything, which is it's kind of funny because like it should be like, oh, I should definitely be recycling more and all this other stuff. And I do my part, but like even if I don't directly end up in a job like right off the bat climate related, I
mhm,
still want to do a good job to make it as like ethical as possible. Um because I think like, or that's one of my motives, just to like be an ethical like engineer. Um and as a climate, or like I would say that's in large part due to my research. Just like wanting to do something that's gonna like help society instead of just like doing something that's just like out of pure interest or something.
mhm. Yeah. So the next question is, so what do you hope to achieve, for example, um, let's say community impact or anything else in particular? What is it that you hope to achieve with your research? So you've talked about what you've done. What are the issues that come to mind when you do those things? Is there a particular goal that you're reaching towards with your research?
With respect to my research, I would say that I'm just hoping to kind of um like I do it with the intention of like not bettering, you know, our world, but the people that are coming after us.
Mhm,
And like it in some way, I would say like it's still in hopes that it can better our world too. But I definitely want to help like communities, or just like on a global scale. I would like to contribute to just like the betterment of environmental issues, uh so that like that there we don't have to like wake up to, like surprising news every day, like or so that we don't have to go another year where like our summer is like 2 degrees hotter than it was last year and all that. I just want to be able to help, whether it be pollution related or just anything else. I want to, with respect to my research, I ultimately just want to be able to like lessen the load of anything going on right now.
mhm, mhm, definitely. And then this question is mostly, I know that when you were talking the breakout room, you mentioned this idea of, that the money's there, or not that the money's there, but this idea that the solutions to most of these problems are there. The thing is, nobody wants to fund these solutions. So, in terms of how to, I don't want to be like, oh my God, generate a business model right now for how to solve this. But when you're thinking about solutions on this very grand scale or even very tiny scale, what do you think about, like, what are the solutions you're thinking about and you're coming up with, and what do you think are pros and cons to each of those solutions?
Mhm. So I definitely think I guess the overall goal, the end goal would be to generate the appropriate funding for what we need to do. Um, I think like if I had to do anything right now, like if I had anything organized that I'd want like people empowered to see is like that it's worth it. Because I mean I don't want to like get too into like the political standpoint of the country and all that, but like everything is money related, you know. And I remember seeing like this past summer like just an article talking about like how beneficial like switching to solar power for houses would be and like all the benefits. And then at the end of the article, oh, and this was MIT, and then they were like oh, but the only downside is that like not enough of a profit would be made. And like kind of seeing, you know, like really like that one disadvantage trumps like all the advantages available.
Mhm.
um so I would just like wanna, if I could set up a business model, I'd want people to see just how beneficial it would be to implement these like alternatives. Or like I know another issue is like, for example, uh like oil reserves and all that, and the jobs that they create for people.
Mhm.
um but like it, from an economic standpoint, if like countries fully committed to something like replacing oil reserves with another alternative,
Mhm.
uh like it could create the same amount of jobs, and like um it could like generate the same amount of money. It would be the safer replacement, and it would be just as effective. So I would just like, if I had something organized, that's what I would show them. Like this is it, it works. You know,
Mhm.
you just need to listen.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think you bring up a very good point. I was actually thinking about, like, when I asked this question, I was thinking about this idea of like here in California where you get I think you get an incentive to buy or use an electric vehicle. You also get an incentive to put up solar panels because you can sell the extra electricity that you make. You can also get, I don't know what it is, I can't remember, but I think you get like tax rebates
Mhm.
if you get like a solar panel. But it begs the question that just installing the solar panel itself is something that takes so much money. Like it's almost like a business where you need, like, I mean, yes, you can make profits, but you need a substantial capital to start. And I feel like with aviation, it's going to be even more ridiculous because it's an entire ass plane. So you're going to need more money than sin to be able to like get something like that off the ground before you can even be able to like generate profits, quote unquote, or even like see the effects. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I definitely agree with that, especially because like another example is like those fuel alternatives, if they came into place, you know, I'm sure a lot of airlines are funded by oil corporations or vice versa, to where
Mhm.
like they're not incentivized to, you know, make that replacement despite it being cheaper or, you know, more sustainable.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. And then I know, like at the beginning, you also talked about your family and its impact, and almost like the impact in which climate change, or you might say human-led efforts that lead us more towards climate change, have impacted you. I guess, how does that play into the research that you're doing now? Is there any aspect, That's a very weird question. I know you answered it in the breakout room. Just feel free to like add on some here. But yeah.
Yeah, so the question is like, could you kind of like repeat
Mhm.
it? Yeah. It's
Yeah.
about,
So
right?
yeah, almost like how your family was impacted by climate change and how that has almost inspired, or how does that come into the work that you do today?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that, like I mentioned like the general LA population, a lot of children are currently like being born with asthma. And that kind of like directly correlated with my personal life with my little brother being born with it, or at least like some form of it. Uh and like it's such a normalized thing in our community for like someone's sibling or someone to have asthma, that I just thought like, everyone's being born with asthma. Like it's it's like the kind of thing, like where like it's not necessarily like a product of like pollution or something, like it just happens. But that wasn't the case. It's exactly because of pollution,
Mhm.
so that, like, kind of having that in mind, it was kind of like a motive to like look into these issues and be able to, like, as I had mentioned earlier, to contribute to the like combat of this issue. I think like just my family overall, we don't really realize how much like the factories that are around our community like impact us,
Mhm.
uh, and like the trade-offs that we have for it. For example, like there's a Budweiser and Bud Light factory that I like whenever I'm passing by on the freeway, I always see it like so much smoke just coming out of the building. But then like, if I drive 15 minutes more, I could end up in like Westwood, LA.
Mhm.
And there's nothing but mansions there and like gated communities. So while I can't personally change like the housing situation for people, I would much
Mhm.
rather change like the health disparities,
Mhm.
like at the very least, if not everyone can be living in like 15 room, 7 bathroom houses,
Mhm.
at least like we can ensure that people living in these smaller homes like are still just as safe as others.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a key issue to bring up. This idea, almost like things that are being normalized that are not necessarily okay to be normalized. And I feel like for a lot of marginalized communities, especially, I feel like, especially if you live in a marginalized place, you kind of experience it yourself where certain issues are normal, but they're not meant to be. The idea, I was thinking about like food deserts and how, for example, with food deserts, they don't have an appropriate store literally around home to go to. So you have people who eat chips, breakfast, night, dinner, and then McDonald's with a little bit of lettuce as healthy meals. And it's almost insane to think about, especially like now I'm being at UCSD and seeing what healthy food probably looks like. It's kind of like interesting to see how what we consider to be as healthy is not necessarily the case. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, do you want to say something? Sorry, I cut you
Oh
off.
no, yeah, like it's just like almost a sociological just kind of aspect of what we consider normal.
Mhm.
Because like in our cultures, it's okay for us to have like, whether it's a belief system, a dietary practice or something,
Mhm.
like it like people can go ahead and understand that, that's the way cultures are set up, and like brought onto like one another and stuff,
Mhm.
versus like when it's systematically
Mhm.
constructed to like not be equitable,
Mhm.
like that's a different story, right? Like you know, you mentioned the McDonald's. There's only like one McDonald's like pretty close to campus, whereas like back at home for me, like there's like four that I could drive to at any given moment that are all like equidistant away from me.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the Hawaii is a very interesting case in point where it's almost like I was thinking about this the other day, but the closest store we have here is not a Walmart. It's Whole Foods. Like at Whole Foods, if you enter Whole Foods, they barely have any snacks in there. It's all healthy food for healthy options. And then you have Rouse, which is you can find like junk food, yes, but you can also find a whole lot of healthy food as well. But then if you go to like some other places, it's almost like this weird disconnect in the world that you're like, are we still living in the same place? Like, I didn't even travel like 10 minutes past the freeway, and it's almost like an entirely different world that we're living in. And I think it's always eye-opening a little bit. And especially here in college where you get to meet people from both sides of the spectrum. Like at least here at UCSD, I've seen wealth that has boggled my mind. Like I'm like, you have that much money? You're a college student? Wait a minute. But then
Yeah.
you also see the kind of stuff where like people can't even study because they're working 24/7 to be able to like feed their families, do stuff. And I'm like, we're the same age. And I feel like you're working as if you're a 50-year-old. But okay. And it's very interesting how that in itself, that imbalance plays into a lot of things. But most especially like health disparity. What's life if you don't have like good health? You have to go to the hospital every time, but it is what
Yeah,
it is. But yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, it's all good though. So it's not good. It's not good. I should stop saying that. I always tell people it's
No,
not good.
yeah,
I'm like,
it's not good,
no.
but like
Mm-mm.
it, not what can you do either, but like, you know, at the
Mhm.
moment, you know, we can deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this last couple of questions is just about the journal. So because this is kind of like a yearly thing, if you will, we want to just be able to improve our system for the next group of people. So we kind of modify what we're doing so that someone else might say, a better opportunity, a better chance. In addition, just knowing how we can better help students move through this process to make it a little bit easier. So how has the journal helped you in general?
uh in general, I think just kind of helping develop myself as a professional. I think you know, like uh so like for example, like I 3 years ago, even I would have never even like thought about having a publication to my name, versus now I kind of like I kind of see how like it develops me intellectually. I kind of see how like, let's say in 10 years, if I'm still publishing things, I can look back at the work I've done um and kind of see like, oh, this is how I've built like my work over the years and stuff. So I think that's one very beneficial thing. So if I kind of like uh let this go over onto just like the program overall, I think just setting myself up to explore different topics and like put them out into the world to contribute to literature. I think that's like something that's very like beneficial to my professional goals, I would say.
Just give me a minute to
No
just.
worries.
Okay. And then last but not least, are there any feedbacks that you have for us? I imagine like after this entire process, there'll be a much more personalized, if you will, place where you can answer things that you want us to change throughout the entire process. But just now, are there things that come to your mind in terms of what we can do to make the process better?
So you mean the process of like the publication journal, or
Yeah, so all the way up to like when you submitted your paper till now, are there things that you felt like we could have done better, or something of that nature?
mm, I think I think I guess I'll comment on something like that was done well. I think like
Mhm,
the gaps between like when things were due, I
mhm,
think they were pretty reasonable, and like they were like I definitely understand the process of editing and like having other people review the work. You know, it takes time because we all have busy schedules, but I
mhm,
think like it was done to, you know, I just finished my research 4 months ago, so that this isn't a very long timeline. I think that was something
mhm,
that was done well, being kind of consistent with due dates or having people reach out to us and everything. You know, I was able to both kind of cool down from like an intensive summer of just reading and reading and reading, to like now I can reflect on my work and also just, you know, go back to it ready to work on it again.
mhm. And then is there something that you would like to change or something that would make the process better?
Mm, I think I'm not sure if I have anything
It's so
directly.
good.
Yeah, I
It's
think
so good.
it's been pretty you know, like it hasn't been demanding.
Mhm,
Uh so like I don't feel like this is something I'm stressed out about, but more of like a side project I'm doing.
mhm.
So I think like that's done well. I don't think I would change that.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good. But by the time we publish the journal and after that, we'll send like a feedback form to you. And I think that will break down the process a little bit better, just so that you can be able to give us almost like a feel for like each of the specific things that, for example, oh, how was using Google Classroom? Barely anyone ever uses it except for submission, but it's okay. We're going to ask about that. And then we're going to go into like much more bigger detail. I feel like then you'd be able to like flesh out your thoughts more. But I also think it would be anonymous that
Oh,
way.
okay.
If
Yeah.
you if you're like, oh my God, I hate this evil. It's okay.
No.
We'll see. But yeah. It's all good though, but thanks for being such a good sport. It was very interesting to hear about you and the work that you've done. I don't think anyone ever tells you guys this, but literally it's amazing the work you guys do and having to do it just based off of interest and not necessarily something someone else is necessarily paying you for or going out of their way to tell you, oh my God, you need to do this, but starting something just because you're passionate about it, and especially something that is as tremendous of an undertaking as aerospace industry and climate change. And I know you might feel that the work that you're doing is so small, but at least you heard it here first. It's such an important work to do. And if anything, you have a very unique voice to contribute, and I wanted to let you know that. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I really I feel like this was a really good like opportunity for me to just, you know, talk about um like the work I did, which I feel like
Mhm,
I didn't get to talk about enough. And like just like how much it helped me, you know, like the benefit of actually having these programs in a larger
mhm,
institution. And then
mhm.
you know, just like this whole interview, you know, I found very, very beneficial to just be able to talk about it with you and to hear other people's stories as well.
Yeah, but it's all good. I'm excited to see what you do this, but as for now, we're practically done. I know you have a lot of stuff to do, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you for literally spending hours and hours with us here. But yeah, well, have a nice day. Don't let the bed bugs bite. And if you have any questions, just reach out to us. But yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for hosting and all that. And am I gonna, do we go back to the larger room or
Oh no.
is this?
Uh wait, let me